There is a feeling that has no clean name in any modern language. You know it, because if you are watching this, there is a good chance you have lived inside it for most of your life. It is the feeling of standing in the middle of a crowd, surrounded by laughter and noise and movement, and feeling completely, utterly alone. Not lonely, not sad, just wrong. Like the signal your body is sending and the signal the world around you is broadcasting are operating on different frequencies that will never quite sync. Like you arrived somewhere that was not the address you were given. Like this world, with all its beauty and all its noise, is a place you are visiting rather than a place you belong. Most people who feel this way are told there is something broken in them. They are prescribed adjustments. They are handed diagnoses, medications, motivational frameworks, coping strategies. They are told to fit. They are told to adapt. They are told that belonging is a skill you can learn, a habit you can build, a perspective shift away. But what if none of that is true? What if that feeling, that specific irreducible feeling of being foreign to this world, is not a malfunction? What if it is a signal? What if it is, in fact, the most important information your soul has ever tried to give you? 2,000 years ago, in a room that history almost erased entirely, Jesus gathered 11 people around him. Not crowds, not thousands. 11. And he told them the truth about why certain souls would never, no matter how long they lived or how hard they tried, feel at home on this earth. He told them where those souls actually came from. He told them what this world actually is and who built it and why. He told them what happens to those souls when the body finally stops, and every word of what he said was written down. The document that contains those words is called the Pistis Sophia. It is one of the most astonishing texts ever discovered, and almost no one in the mainstream world talks about it. Tonight, we are going to change that. Because what Jesus said to those 11 people, every recorded word of it, may be the explanation you have been waiting for your entire life. Stay with me. This will change the way you see everything. The year is somewhere around 350 of the Common Era. A monk is copying manuscripts by candlelight in a scriptorium somewhere in Egypt. The text he is copying is not one of the Gospels that would later be approved by councils and emperors. It is something much older, much stranger, much more dangerous to the powers that would eventually control what Christianity would become. The monk finishes his work. The manuscript is sealed. It disappears. 15 centuries pass. In 1773, a Coptic manuscript surfaces in the antiquities market in Egypt. A Scottish traveler named James Bruce acquires it and brings it to London. A scholar named M.G. Schwartze begins translating it from Coptic into Latin. He dies before he can publish. His colleague completes the work. The document is published in 1851. The document inside is the Pistis Sophia. This is not a short theological treatise. This is a record of conversations between the risen Jesus and his closest disciples, covering a period that the text itself says lasted 11 years after the resurrection. 11 years of teaching that the canonical Gospels record almost none of. 11 years during which Jesus, according to this text, removed the limitations that had governed what he could reveal during his earthly ministry, and spoke with complete, unfiltered directness about the nature of reality. The text opens with a description. Jesus is sitting with his disciples on the 15th day of the month of Tob, and a great light descends on him, a light so overwhelming that the disciples cannot look directly at him. It lasts for 3 hours. When the light recedes, Jesus begins to speak, and what he says is not what any Sunday school lesson ever prepared anyone for. He begins by explaining where he has been, not in metaphors, in cosmological detail. He describes levels of reality above this world, levels he calls the Treasury of Light, the regions of the height, the spaces of the first mystery. He describes the architecture of the spiritual universe the way an engineer describes a building, with structure, with hierarchy, with cause and effect. But before we go further into what he said, we need to understand who was in the room, because this is one of the most striking things about the Pistis Sophia, and almost no commentary you will find in popular literature spends any time on it. The text is specific. The 11 gathered around Jesus are the 11 remaining apostles. Judas Iscariot is absent for reasons the text does not need to explain. But alongside the apostles, there is someone else, someone who asks more questions than any of the male disciples combined, someone whose understanding Jesus repeatedly and explicitly praises as superior to the others in the room. Her name is Mary Magdalene, and in the Pistis Sophia, she is not a footnote. She is the primary interlocutor. She is the one who presses hardest, understands deepest, and receives the most detailed answers. This matters, because the world that would later be built on the sanitized version of Christianity made enormous effort to erase exactly this. The centrality of Mary Magdalene, the intellectual and spiritual authority she carried in the earliest circles around Jesus, and the content of the teachings he shared in her presence. What you are about to hear is what they tried to bury. Now, the question at the heart of everything Jesus teaches in the Pistis Sophia: why do certain souls feel so fundamentally foreign to this world? To understand the answer, you have to first understand something that mainstream Christianity spent 16 centuries suppressing: the Gnostic understanding of what this world actually is and who made it. In the cosmology that the Pistis Sophia articulates, a cosmology that Jesus presents not as philosophy but as fact, as the actual structure of reality, this physical world, the one you wake up in every morning, the one with its traffic and its taxes and its wars and its small cruelties and its occasional moments of heartbreaking beauty, was not made by the highest God. Let that land for a moment. The God who made this physical world is not, in this framework, the ultimate divine source. The ultimate divine source, what the Pistis Sophia calls the first mystery, the ineffable, the treasury of the light, is something so far above the material realm that it does not and cannot directly produce matter. It produces light, it produces consciousness, it produces spiritual entities of increasing refinement and power. But the physical world, the dense, heavy, painful, binding physical world, was produced by something else, by entities that the text calls archons. The word archon comes from Greek. It means ruler, lord, governor. And in the Pistis Sophia, the archons are exactly that. They are the rulers of the material realm, the governors of this world, the architects of the dense reality in which human souls find themselves trapped. They are not evil in a cartoonish sense. They are something more disturbing. They are real forces, operating according to their own nature, building a world that serves their purposes, which are not the same as the purposes of the light. One of the central questions Mary Magdalene asks Jesus in the Pistis Sophia is precisely this: if this world is governed by the archons, if it was shaped by forces other than the highest light, then what are human souls doing here? And how did they get here? Jesus answers her in extraordinary detail. He explains that souls are not originally from this world. Souls, real souls, souls made of light, originate from the Treasury of Light, from the regions above, from the world that the archons did not build and cannot reach. But through a series of events that the text describes as a kind of cosmic catastrophe, fragments of that light became enclosed, trapped in matter, bound into bodies, subjected to the laws of a world that was never their home. This is the pneumatic condition. This is what the Gnostics called being a pneumatic, a soul that is made of spiritual light, that carries an actual fragment of the divine, that is in this world, but not of this world, not metaphorically, literally. And this is precisely what Jesus is explaining to those 11 people in that room. He tells them, there are human beings walking on this earth who are not from here. Their bodies are from here, formed by the same biological processes, subject to the same physical laws, aging and hurting and dying exactly like every other body. But the soul inside that body, the actual animating aware center of that person, comes from somewhere else. It descended. It was placed here, or fell here, or was drawn here through the gravitational pull of matter, and it has never stopped sensing, however dimly, However much life has tried to smother the signal that this is not where it belongs, the feeling that has no name, the frequency that doesn't match, Jesus does not present this as a problem to be solved through spiritual practice alone. He does not say, meditate more and you will feel at home here. He says something far more radical. You will never feel completely at home here because you are not from here. And that is not a wound. That is information. That is your nature speaking to you in the only language available to it inside a physical form. But here is where the Pistis Sophia goes somewhere even more remarkable. And this is the part that almost no popular treatment of Gnostic texts spends enough time on. The reason Jesus tells this specifically to 11 people in that specific room is not merely to explain the condition. It is because those 11 people, along with Mary Magdalene, are themselves examples of exactly what he is describing. They are pneumatics. They are souls of light in forms of matter. And the teaching he is giving them is not abstract cosmology. It is a map of where they actually come from, what they are actually made of, and where they are actually going when this life ends. He is giving them back their identity. Now let us go deeper, because the Pistis Sophia does not just describe the pneumatic condition in general terms. It gives specific signs, specific markers, ways that a pneumatic soul can be recognized by others, and more importantly, by itself. The first marker Jesus describes is what we might call the persistent sense of exile. The pneumatic soul does not experience this world as home because the part of it that is made of light is always oriented, however unconsciously, toward the light world. It is like a compass needle. You can shake the compass. You can put it in different environments. You can distract it with 1,000 things, but the needle always returns to pointing north. The pneumatic soul always returns to pointing toward the light. This manifests as restlessness, as dissatisfaction with purely material pursuits, as an inability to be fully satisfied by things that fully satisfy most people. The second marker is a specific quality of knowing. Jesus returns to this repeatedly in the Pistis Sophia. The pneumatic soul knows things it has no mundane explanation for knowing, not psychic powers in a theatrical sense, something quieter and stranger than that, an immediate recognition of certain truths when they are encountered. A deep resonance with certain teachings, certain texts, certain ideas that goes beyond intellectual appreciation into something that feels like remembering, like the soul has heard this before, in a language older than any language available in this life. The third marker is the experience of this world's pleasures and rewards as somehow hollow. The pneumatic soul can enjoy things. It is not numb. It is not joyless. But it finds again and again that the things this world promises will complete it. Success, accumulation, status, even ordinary human love, while genuinely beautiful, do not close the gap, do not fill the space. Because the space they are trying to fill is not a material space. It is the space left by the absence of the light world. And only the light can fill a space shaped like the light. The fourth marker is an unusual relationship to death. Not morbidity, not nihilism, but a fundamental lack of terror about what lies beyond this life that is different from ordinary courage or ordinary faith. The pneumatic soul has some deep, non-rational sense that death is not annihilation, that what it actually is, not the body, not the persona, but the actual soul, will survive. Jesus explains why, because what is made of light cannot be destroyed. The body dissolves. The archons claim what belongs to them. The material elements of the human form return to the material world that generated them. But the light spark, the pneumatic core, returns to the treasury of the light. It cannot be stopped. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be held. And this is where the Pistis Sophia makes one of its most extraordinary claims. A claim that Jesus makes to those 11 people in language so direct that it almost stops your breath when you read it. He tells them, the soul of light, at the moment of physical death, rises through the regions of the archons, and the archons cannot hold it. They recognize it. They know what it is, and they let it pass. Not because they want to, not because they are kind, But because they have no authority over what is made of light, their jurisdiction is matter, their power is density, and what is made of light, purified and recognized by the first mystery, moves through their domains like light moves through air, without resistance, without detention, without end. You need to sit with what that means. Because in the conventional Christian framework, judgment is something performed by God upon the soul. The soul is passive. It is weighed, it is evaluated, it is condemned or saved. But in the framework Jesus lays out in the Pistis Sophia, it is the soul of light that moves and the archons that are powerless. The power differential is completely reversed. The soul of light is not petitioning for salvation, it is going home, and nothing in this world has the authority to prevent that. Now, the soul of Pistis Sophia herself. If you are watching this and you have only heard the name Pistis Sophia as the title of the text, you may not know that Pistis Sophia is also the name of a character within the text, and her story is, quite specifically, the story of every pneumatic soul that has ever lived. Pistis Sophia, whose name translates roughly as faith wisdom, is described in the text as a divine being who, drawn by the light of a false star, descended too far. She moved out of her proper region in the light world and fell into a lower space, a chaotic realm where the forces of darkness recognized her and attacked her. They surrounded her. They stripped her light from her, layer by layer. They trapped her in the chaos and mocked her. And she, in her suffering, cried out. What she cried out are the repentances. 13 prayers preserved verbatim in the Pistis Sophia, each one a direct parallel to one of the Psalms. And if you read them, you will recognize something immediately. You will recognize the voice of someone who feels completely lost in a world that is hostile to their nature, who has somehow ended up in a place that is the opposite of where they belong, who is crying out from the center of their being for recognition, for rescue, for the light that they know exists but cannot currently reach. Jesus, explaining her story to the disciples, makes the parallel explicit. Pistis Sophia is not just a mythological figure, she is a template. What happened to her is a cosmic version of what happens to every pneumatic soul that descends into matter. The descent, the stripping away of light, the disorientation, the longing, the prayers that rise from the bottom of the chaos toward the highest light. And then, and this is what the Pistis Sophia insists on, with a persistence that has the quality of a promise, the response. Because the light hears, the first mystery hears. And Jesus himself, in the narrative, is sent to Pistis Sophia in her lowest moment. He descends into her chaos. He brings her light back to her. He lifts her out, not as a reward for perfect behavior, not as a payment for adequate spiritual practice, simply because she called from her center, because her longing was real, because she never stopped remembering, however faintly, that she was made of something other than the chaos around her. This is what Jesus is telling the 11 people in that room. This is the map. You descended. You lost some of your light in the process. The world you fell into is chaotic by nature, not purely evil, not purely hostile, but not your origin and not your destination. But you remember that restlessness, that sense of exile, that inability to fully settle. That is Pistis Sophia's prayer rising in you. That is your soul calling toward the light with the only voice available to it inside a material form. And the light hears that call with the same faithfulness it showed to Sophia. Now, what does Jesus tell the 11 about what to do with this knowledge? The Pistis Sophia is not a text of resignation. It is not telling you to withdraw from the world or wait passively for death to release you. Jesus tells the disciples that the knowledge of their true nature carries a responsibility. The pneumatic soul has a role to play in the material world, not to be conquered by it, not to be absorbed into it, but to be a presence of light within it. He gives them something the Pistis Sophia calls the mysteries, specific orientations of consciousness that allow the pneumatic soul to maintain its connection to the Treasury of Light while living inside a material body, to remember in an active way what it is and where it comes from, to not be fooled by the world's promises that mattering here, winning here, accumulating here will be enough. The mystery Jesus returns to most often is the mystery of recognition, knowing what you are, not as a self-improvement concept, as a cosmological fact with practical consequences for every decision you make. The soul that knows it is made of light makes different choices than the soul that believes it is made only of matter. It values different things, fears different things, loves more freely, because it is not trying to extract from human relationships the cosmic belonging that only the light can provide. This teaching was considered dangerous enough that the council that shaped Orthodox Christianity in the 3rd and 4th centuries excluded every text that contained it. The criteria for inclusion in what became the New Testament were not simply theological, they were political. Texts that gave too much capacity for direct knowing to ordinary souls, that undermined the necessity of institutional mediation between the human and the divine, were systematically excluded. The Pistis Sophia failed every one of those criteria. It gave Mary Magdalene primary status. It described a cosmos in which the soul of light had direct, unmediated access to the highest truth. It taught that the knowledge of your own divine origin was itself a form of salvation, not dependent on correct doctrine or church membership, but on the activation of what was already fundamentally inside you. Those texts were not destroyed. They were hidden, in jars in the desert, in monasteries in Egypt, in collections in London, and one by one they have surfaced, as if they had been waiting, as if the hiding was always intended to be temporary. The Pistis Sophia surfaces in 1773, the Nag Hammadi Library, 52 texts buried in a sealed jar in Upper Egypt, surfaces in 1945, when a farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman breaks the jar open with his mattock and finds inside it the most significant collection of early Christian and Gnostic writings ever discovered. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Apocryphon of John, the Hypostasis of the Archons. Text after text describing the same cosmology, the same condition, the same map. As if they were all saying the same thing. The time for this knowledge is now. And for those who carry the feeling we began with, that wordless, persistent sense of not belonging, of being oriented towards something this world cannot provide, the surfacing of these texts is not an academic event. It is personal. It is the moment when the exile receives a letter from home, not a letter saying the exile was wrong to feel lost, a letter saying, you were right. You knew something. The feeling was not a malfunction. The signal was accurate. And here, written down in a language old enough to have known the world before the suppression, is the explanation you have been waiting for. Now, I want to be honest with you about something. Reading the Pistis Sophia is not easy. It is a long, complex, repetitive text that repeats the same cosmological structures from multiple angles, that uses terminology that has to be learned, that requires patience. The average modern reader, picking it up without any preparation, will struggle. That is not an accident. The knowledge it contains was always intended for those willing to go deeper than the surface. The archons, after all, rely on the fact that most people won't look. But for those who do look, and if you are still here, 12 minutes into this video, you are one of those people, what the Pistis Sophia offers is something extraordinarily rare. It offers a framework in which your experience makes sense, in which the exile makes sense, in which the longing makes sense, in which the feeling of being made for something more than this world is not romantic delusion but cosmological fact, recorded in the words of Jesus himself, spoken to 11 people in a room that history tried very hard to forget. Jesus describes the awakening of a pneumatic soul using the metaphor of the seal. The light spark within the soul has a seal, a specific quality of light that matches it to the treasury of the light the way a key matches a lock. This seal cannot be removed. The archons cannot remove it. Life can bury it under enough layers of pain and distraction that the soul temporarily loses awareness of it. But the seal is still there, and when something penetrates those layers, when truth strikes the right frequency, the seal responds. The soul recognizes itself. That recognition is what the Gnostics called gnosis. Not knowledge in the ordinary sense of acquired information. Knowledge in the sense of direct, soul-level recognition of what is true. The difference between hearing a description of your homeland and suddenly seeing a photograph of the street where you grew up. One is information, the other is recognition. This is what is happening to many people right now, quietly, individually, privately, encountering the teachings that were buried, reading the texts that were hidden, and feeling that recognition, feeling the frequency that doesn't match the world suddenly reveal itself as a frequency that matches something much older and much more real than the world. The answer to the question they have been living, why does this world feel like not home, is this: because you are right, because you are made of something this world cannot contain. The feeling of exile is not a wound to be healed. It is the seal that means that at the moment of your death, when you rise through the regions the archons govern, they will see what you are and they will let you pass. Not because of what you achieved, not because you believed the right things or belonged to the right institution, because of what you are. Because of the spark of the first mystery placed inside you before you ever drew breath in this world, that will return to its source when you stop. And now I want to address something that comes up for almost everyone who encounters this material for the first time. If this is real, if this cosmology is accurate, what am I supposed to do with it? How does knowing this change how I live? The Pistis Sophia has several answers. The first is the simplest and in some ways the most radical. Stop trying to fully belong here, not in a way that makes you dysfunctional or withdrawn, but in the sense of releasing the exhausting project of trying to make this world feel like home when it is not and never will be your home. The longing is not a problem, it is a compass, and compasses are only useful when you let them point. The second is the practice of active remembering. The Pistis Sophia describes the mysteries as forms of practice that keep the pneumatic soul oriented toward the light even inside a material body. This can take many forms: contemplation of certain texts, the Pistis Sophia itself, the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocryphon of John, the Hermetic writings that drink from the same source, certain forms of prayer that are not petition but recognition, not asking for things but acknowledging what is true, certain kinds of music, silence, beauty that strike the seal and make it ring. The common thread, the deliberate, repeated turning of consciousness away from the noise of the material world and toward the quality of awareness that feels most genuinely itself. The part of you that watches the thoughts without being entirely captured by them. The part that is aware even in the midst of everything. That part is made of light, and it responds to attention. The third thing the Pistis Sophia teaches is the most difficult: compassion for those who are not pneumatic. It is very easy when you first encounter this framework to use it as a lens of contempt, to look at people who seem completely at home in the world and tell yourself, they don't understand. Jesus warns against exactly this. The pneumatic soul that has recognized what it is does not become superior. It becomes responsible. It becomes, in the word the Pistis Sophia uses, a light in the chaos. Not a searchlight that judges from above, a light that is simply present, that shines by its nature rather than by its effort. Pistis Sophia herself, in her 13 prayers, never once expresses contempt for the chaos that imprisons her. She expresses anguish, she expresses longing, she expresses profound, undefended vulnerability, the vulnerability of a being made of light who is in a place where light is scarce and every day is a kind of weight. And it is precisely that vulnerability, that authentic, unarmored longing that the first mystery hears, not the strength of her theology, not the correctness of her doctrine, the purity of her longing, the truth of her ache. This is perhaps the most quietly devastating thing Jesus says to those 11 people. The way home is not through achievement, it is through honesty. The way the light recognizes its own is not through performance. It is through the authentic quality of the longing itself. The soul that stands before the universe and says with complete honesty, I do not belong here, and I know it, and I have always known it, and I cannot pretend otherwise. That soul is recognized. That soul is seen. That soul is, in the language of the Pistis Sophia, answered. Sophia prays. The light responds. This is the entire story, told in the most elaborate cosmological detail the ancient world could produce, but reducible to those 3 sentences. The soul in exile calls from its center. The light hears, the light comes. And in the meantime, in the time between the calling and the coming, which is what we call a human life, the Pistis Sophia says that the pneumatic soul is never entirely alone. The same frequency that marks you as light also connects you to the source of light, dimly, imperfectly, through the static of matter and density. But really, the connection is not severed. The archons can suppress it, but they cannot cut it, because what is made of light is always in some frequency that the ear of matter cannot hear, in contact with the light that made it. This is why certain music makes you feel what you cannot name. This is why certain silences feel inhabited. This is why certain moments of beauty strike you as true in a way that has nothing to do with aesthetics and everything to do with recognition. The seal is responding. The frequency is finding its match. The Pistis Sophia calls these moments grace. Not grace in the sense of favor earned. Grace in the sense of the light reaching through the layers of the material world to touch the seal of the soul that carries a fragment of itself. Because the light is not passive, it does not simply wait in the treasury for souls to find their way back. It actively reaches. And in the story of Sophia, it actively descends, in the form of Jesus himself, into the chaos to retrieve what is lost. This is the gospel the Pistis Sophia preserves, not the gospel of correct belief, the gospel of cosmic retrieval, the announcement that the light is looking for its own, that the feeling of exile in your chest is answered by a search you cannot see, that you are not simply hoping to return home. Home is hoping to receive you. 11 people in a room heard this. A woman named Mary Magdalene understood it most clearly of all of them, and her questions drew it out in more detail than anyone else could have. A monk in Egypt 300 years later copied it by candlelight because he recognized that what he was copying mattered. A Scottish traveler in 1773 put it in a bag and carried it to London. A scholar on his deathbed made sure it was not lost when he died. A farmer in Egypt in 1945 broke open a sealed jar and found that the friends of the Pistis Sophia had preserved even more. And now you are here, reading or listening to the words of a text that was hidden for 1,500 years, feeling perhaps something that is not quite information and not quite emotion, something in between or behind both. Something that feels like the seal responding. That feeling is not an accident. That feeling is not wishful thinking. That feeling is recognition. And if the Pistis Sophia is right, if what Jesus told those 11 people in that room is what the actual structure of reality looks like, then that recognition is mutual. The light that hears the longing is already aware of yours. Has always been, will always be. Separated by the thickness of the material world, by the weight of the body, by the noise of the archons and their endlessly stimulating world, but not separated by anything that is in the end real. The exile is temporary. This is what the Pistis Sophia insists on, page after page, prayer after prayer, teaching after teaching. The chaos is not the final address. The weight of the world is not the final word. The feeling of exile is not what you are. It is where you are. And the place you are has an exit, known to those who carry the seal, marked by the light that made them. Sophia prayed from the bottom of the chaos. The light came. The seal on your soul is the same frequency as hers, and the light that heard her prayer is still listening.